Hi there, I'm Richard Hill, the host of eComOne. Welcome to episode 176. Yeah, it's 176 weeks in. 176 episodes, this one's a cracker. I speak with Paul Jarrett, Chief Executive Officer at Bulu, where Paul heads up a team delivering some of the world's biggest brands' subscription boxes to the likes of Disney, etc. Now, Paul dives into how can a business use personalisation with their subscription box to retain their customers. A lot of people have signed up for various subscriptions over the last year, but retaining those clients and whether or not you really want to retain those clients, and some really cool ideas from Paul and takes on that. And what strategies can e-commerce companies use to make sure their subscriptions stand out over a very, very, very crowded marketplace in most instances now. We talk overcoming some of the challenges for subscription boxes around retention, and Paul takes on the future of the subscription box business. And of course, so much more in this episode. So if you enjoy this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening to this episode, so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Now, let's head over to this fantastic episode. Hi, Paul. How you doing?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I am very fantastic too.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
Now, this is a first. So I'm sat in Lincoln City in the UK, and you're sat in Lincoln, Nebraska. Yes. What are the chances of that?
Yeah, who's the good twin and who's the bad twin? Probably the American is the bad one.
No comment. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Paul. I think if you can kick things off, introduce yourself to our listeners and how you got into the world of e-commerce.
Yes, my name is Paul Jarrett. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bulu. The way that I actually got into e-commerce was trying to survive in college and selling through eBay. And that was a interesting time. And then that rolled into, I was at an ad agency, and we were one of the first companies to do an e-commerce website, which is embarrassing now, but at the time it was cutting edge, right? And worked in San Francisco, New York, worked in advertising agencies, some of the biggest agencies in the world, and just always ended up working on the product side. And fast forward, we raised some capital, we launched a subscription box, and now about 10 years later, we're actually solving the challenge that we had 10 years in the beginning of the subscription box. So always just been around e-commerce and kind of the forefront of CPG.
Love it. So sort of out of necessity really of your previous roles, go sort of subscription.
Yeah, I say just a poor kid that grew up in a trailer park in Nebraska trying to figure out how to, scrape by and work for myself.
Yeah, no, I love these stories. So so obviously Bulu, now that's the brand now, yes. And very much focused, I believe, if I get my terminology right, working with big brands, and working on delivering and their subscription boxes to, various, types of customers, around the world. So I think it'd be good, obviously we spoke to quite a lot of subscription businesses and subscription fulfillment businesses. What makes you guys sort of maybe different to other providers?
Yeah. Well, we, 10 years ago, we started with Bulu Box, which was kind of the sixth subscription box. And I think early on we identified hey, this is just kind of shipping, right? It's multiple varied items shipped on a recurring basis. But if we kind of call it something like sample box or subscription box, now it's interesting as far as marketing goes, right? The whole subscription box thing, that's been around for well over 100 years. So it's nothing new, right? It's just remarketed, rebranded. And so we launched with that, with Bulu Box, 4 to 5 premium vitamin supplement snack samples. And as we grew up to 60,000 subscribers, 10 million plus in revenue, I think it was under 2.5 years, somewhere in there. We got the attention of a lot of big brands, and, they wanted to be part of it. They were interested in it. A lot of them wanted just to know how to do subscription, but really what I would say that they didn't know, what they were actually asking was the same problem that we had with our fulfillment and technology, which when we first started with Bulu Box, we crushed our first two 3PL, third-party logistics, the people that store, pack, ship for us. We had to acquire the third one just to keep it going because of the scale, right? And really, I think what the brands didn't know, or what they were really asking for was, hey, I'm in innovation or marketing. I'm a big brand. I want to do something that's a little edgy, but not too crazy. And actually my problem is I can't get the thing into customers' hands in the package and the way that I want. What are you folks doing that's different? And the answer was, we were doing all of the hard stuff. We were picking up the phone, calling places saying, what's your website? I'm like, what do you, tell me more, tell me how to do this. I mean, we go so far back that early on, we were one of the first users of Shopify, and I called them so much and bothered them so much that Toby, the CEO, I think he goes by Tobias, right? But Toby is what I knew him by. Toby was answering customer service, the CEO of Shopify, and he was working with me, and he was like, yo, Paul, I really think you should just focus on building a subscription payment app. And I'm like, what does this clown know? And I wish I would have listened to him, and, great lesson there. But, working with him and working with the Shopify team, trying to figure out how to do things. And it really just opened up this world of if you're relentless enough, you can get things to people the way that you want. It's just a lot of times you got to plow that path forward. And big brands, that was our focus. But what's exciting now is we're taking all the past 8 years of making subscription boxes for big brands, making our own subscription box. And now we're offering it to brands of any size to be able to deliver it where they want to, how they want to, in the style they want. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a cool business, isn't it? I love these, I've got various subscriptions that I'm paying for, when I get those delivered from certain brands, you get a very, very excited and exciting experience where, it's that time of month, we're getting there. I'm going to, my son will text us a delivery. I'm like, what is it? It's such a, I'm going to, whereas other ones, come through, they get it very wrong, where it's a very, brown box maybe, and they haven't put that effort into the packaging. How, for our listeners, how can a business really sort of add in an element of pizzazz, maybe personalisation to that sort of delivery and that package?
Yeah, I think that there's two things that you can do. One is do it yourself, right? And just because you hire a third party to work with doesn't mean you have to do all your fulfillment or you have to do all your software or anything with one entity, right? And I think that's a big mistake that people don't think through, right? Maybe you do simple pick and pack somewhere, but you do complicated gifts at a local place. Maybe you do subscription as a local church or organization wants to do it, at a low rate, right? And I think the second thing is everybody, from what I see, and I used to be this way, logistics and shipping, it's super intimidating, right? There's big knuckleheads like me roaming around like Yeti in a giant warehouse, right? But it doesn't have to be. And you just have to ask, can I come tour? Can I come? And, I think when you break down that and you really understand logistics is just, fewer footsteps and getting it from point A to point B with fewer touches, fewer footsteps, then you can kind of become dangerous. And I see people, and I know this is the case because I was the same way. I steered away from logistics for, the first 2 out of 12 years. And, then it was obvious, we have to get involved and we have to find the right partners or do it ourselves if we want things delivered the way that we see it in our minds, right? And that I think is the key thing. Start with the end in mind. What do you want the person to experience? It might not be a big customized experience. You might be the brand that's cheap, right? But visualize and think about that end user and start to work your way backwards. And that's what we've really hung our hat on is, we're focused right now on what we call hybrid hub and spoke logistics. And really what that means is we can empower, because we learned the hardest way possible with subscription boxes and big brands, right? We didn't know any better, right? We did the hardest things possible in this world, the world of logistics, right? And because we've done that, now we understand that the ability to offer unlimited sales channel distributions to brands of any sizes, have them get it in the box they want, the way that they want it, whether it's a gift or subscription, that's what we've been focused on. And it's really cool to see. One of our brands just posted in the last 3 months, they got 50 different independent physical bricks and mortar retail locations. So not a big brand, just 50 different ones. And we're supplying the product to those. And it's a really cool strategy of, forget Amazon, forget Shopify, forget all of that. Go call all the local independent dealers to sell your product. And it's been really fun to watch. But yeah, we cut our teeth on the hardest thing. We definitely were treading water for a couple of years, working with big brands, trying to deliver.
What are some of the, so when we're thinking about these deliveries arriving at our customers, what are some of the standout things that you're seeing at the moment that are a bit of a inspiration, a wow for our listeners? Obviously, I think there's, so many people doing everything at the moment, isn't there? And then it's trying to, build that loyalty with the customers, and create that wow, that experience that you want more, and I think, I remember doing sort of, we have a thing in our business where we send what we call a purple envelope. It's not quite as exciting as what you're talking about.
It might work though, right?
Yeah, it does work. Yeah, I'm letting. I hope there's no other agencies listening to this, but we send a purple envelope. And on that post, fairly big purple envelope. If you get a purple envelope in the post, you are opening that purple envelope. Yeah,
true.
It's quite crude, old school, lumpy mail, but it works. Sending certain. I'm not going to say what's in it because I don't want to give away all the trade secrets. Yeah. But what are some of the things you're seeing that our customers could relate to from maybe for them to send things out in their businesses, their subscription businesses, or in their just day-to-day, shipping?
Yeah.
What would you say?
I would say there's a couple of things that I see, and I want to be respectful with my words, but I also I don't like doing these things without kind of spitting the truth, right? Like being honest and being like, yeah, this is what's happening, right? Here's probably the number one thing that we see. In the pandemic, there were a lot of softwares and a lot of services that popped up, and hats off to them, right? And I think, I always say ship, fill in the blank. There's multiple ones, like the company names. And I think they all have their place within the ecosystem. But what I would say is a lot of those companies are kind of built on a model of kind of Uber for fulfillment and shipping, right? And sometimes you get a bad Uber driver, right? And what do you do when that Uber driver is kind of babysitting your product, right? And so what we hear is a lot of frustration with kind of the dawn of the 4PL software type things, right? And that's kind of a bummer, but what we see is there was a lot of education and a lot of people cut their teeth using those services, and now they actually know what they need and what they want, and they're not afraid to go out and search for it. So that's definitely the first trend, is people are kind of trying to get out of those things. And I think it makes sense because a lot of those services aren't flexible, right? They just fee every time you want to change something up, right? And that's hard. And I respect it. They got their business model, everybody else does. But unless you're shipping kind of one thing really basically, I think that's really hard to make sense for a lot of companies. The second thing that we see actually kind of goes back to exactly what you were talking about. And we've been preaching this for a decade, and probably also because our background, the co-owner and I, who happens to be my spouse, we came from the ad agency world, and we have a firm belief that if your product has the correct margin, or is on track for the correct margin, that you need to start looking at all of your deliveries as a fancy direct mail piece, right? Now, what does that mean? We say a kind of marketing like a pirate, right? Like you activate them, you acquire them, you activate them, you retain them, you use them for referrals, and you make sure you make the correct revenue. Marketing like a pirate, Dave McClure, AARRR, right? And so if you have a delivery box, I don't care if it's subscription or if it's just a basic box, you should be utilizing that to, at the very least, say, here, hand this coupon to your friend, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest thing that we see people missing, is using that mechanism as a referral system properly. And man, you're getting free direct marketing, free advertising. Some people will say customer experience, but I think that's the wrong word. I think the word is a proper marketing tool that doesn't go overboard is what you should view your shipments as. Yeah.
It just gets missed so many times, doesn't it? It frustrates the hell out of me when I order.
Yeah, it's more. It's like, of course, it's more expensive, but what's the ROI on it if you don't know, if you don't try, right?
Yeah. Yeah, some people get it so right with it, and some people are just so off. And I think they're just maybe I think, to be fair, it's normally the smaller mid-sized brands or the smaller brands that get it wrong because they're just so busy focused on acquisition.
Absolutely.
And not really thinking about that long-term, stepping back, hang on a minute. Now, if we just got that guy to buy 5 times and recommend 5 friends, it's very basic marketing, isn't it? It's obviously very, very cheap to do that in comparison to win 10 new customers and via acquisition and just keep burning them. Just giving them a nice experience and tying in that brand story to that experience, loyalty schemes, loyalty tiers. There's all sorts you can do. I love it. There's nothing bad when you open a box and it's like, hey, Richard, you've got 700 points. One more order and you're going to be in the Platinum Club. It's like, oh, these guys know what they're doing. If they know exactly who I am as a customer, they're putting that much effort into that piece, and that's just on a box. I've got a lot more faith in that brand that they actually operate at a certain level that tells me that they really give a shit about their customers and retention, a long-term strategy, which means they'll be there long-term in theory. Yeah. It says a lot about a company, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And I think it's so easy to think someday or when the margin is there or people, it is an afterthought. And, we are kind of preaching like, why not grow your brand and grow sales through the last place anybody thought to look with logistics? Because if you can deliver anywhere, like maybe you sell a batch of gifts to a school, right? Maybe you do take returns and ship them out and have them sold at secondhand stores or whatever it is, right? But that will never happen if you don't connect with the customer. And really, you want to kind of like train people to like be okay with paying a little bit more maybe on your website, or develop a strategy where you have different products, you have different bundles, you sell that thing on Amazon, you sell that thing on Groupon, you sell that thing on TikTok, but at your website, that's where, maybe it's the lowest margin or maybe it's the higher. It doesn't matter. It's all just a game of metrics, right?
Yeah. No, so that's a great tip. So I just wanted to introduce you very quickly to our sponsors, Pricing. Now, Pricing is a competitor price tracking and monitoring software that can dynamically change a product's prices on all sales channels. They work with brands such as Samsung, Sony, Suzuki to increase their online revenue. Now, if you run Google Shopping, which I know a lot of you absolutely do, this software is absolutely key to accelerating profits. One of the reasons I recommend Pricing to my clients is because you can find out your competitors' pricing and stock availability all in one simple to understand dashboard, giving you a huge competitive advantage. Now, if you have any inquiries and questions about this software, or you're ready to get cracking, we have worked out a very, very special deal for our listeners where you can get a free month's trial and then 25% off for the first 3 months. Head to eComOne.com pricing and complete the inquiry form, and we will connect our listeners to the Pricing team. Right, let's head straight back to the episode. For those that are listening that are maybe thinking of adding in, a subscription box or improving their existing offering, or just really personalizing that experience, you've obviously seen in the 8-10 years you've been doing this, all the things not to do, and the changes in the industry, and what are some of the sort of bigger challenges or issues that you've seen that our listeners need to avoid?
There's the number one things that people need to avoid, and then there's probably like the number one things that people ask about, and it's fascinating how different they are, right? So, we hear like the things that people worry about is like, what does my box cost? What is my shipping rate? What is, basically whatever in a Google search kind of pops up, right? Now, the things that they actually should be concerned about is the first thing that just is mind-blowing. They don't think about different channels and customer service, right? Sure, you can do a subscription box, but like the biggest challenge is you're going to have a significant more amount of people saying, where's my box at? Not because the box is late. It's just, that's how the customer is that subscribes to things, right? So how are you going to handle that, right? Returns, right? Do you even need to pay to get a return? A lot of times it's just cheaper to leave it there, but you also need to set up things to sniff out the people that are, stealing from you, doing that, right? The next thing I would say is, people kind of assume that software or whatever is going to get them the best shipping rates, or their partner is, or whatever. And it is not. And in the US, it is hand-to-hand combat, face-to-face, negotiate. There is only, it's kind of interesting because I've just been letting the cat out of the bag in logistics, because I'm kind of got tired of just being told like, oh, don't say that, don't present that, don't share that or whatever. And you're like, this is why everybody hates to talk to 3PLs and fulfillment companies. Like, I hated it. And it, like, I see how, the idea is add fees and try to make more margin. And I think that's a broken, old, silly model. And so another thing that I share is the only two things to actually get your shipping rates down. I'll say actually three. Number one, you got to pick up the phone to DHL, FedEx, UPS, USPS, go meet with your post office, postmaster general, have a conversation with them, right? Tell them what you're trying to do. Do not negotiate on your current prices. Show them the projections, sell the story to them, let them know if they take a chance on you, like, here's maybe what it is, right? So also, like, do that with your 3PL, go independently shop and get the prices yourself, keep them honest, right? Call their bluff, right? The second thing is you're probably in reality negotiating the sales rep's commission is the first thing. Right?
Yeah.
So one, you got to get face to face. I don't care what anybody says about software. It helps, but it's not Bible. Two, understand that you're kind of negotiating that sales rep's commission. So you probably want to come to an understanding of, as we make more, that's how they're going to make. Subscription is a great way to sell them. And then the third thing is you have to be able to project the amount of trucks that are going to be coming to your warehouse, right? And one of the, we have 100,000 square feet. We have, 30 plus clients. And one of the reasons that we do push and focus a little bit on subscription and kitting and bundling is because that allows us to future forecast and to tell FedEx, like, hey, if you come at this time, if you do this, that's 7 trucks, not 9 trucks, right? Yeah. And if you can, those are the actual 3 things that you can do to reduce your rates. And those things are the reason that logistics, 3PLs, 5PLs like us exist, is because there is no way that you can be great at software, great at the consumer packaged good, and great at logistics. And what do most people that we talk to not realize? They're a logistics company, right? They have a CPG, they have all those things, but like the logistics thing, like that's the foundation, right? And so, it's really fun working with these brands that are scaling and they're shipping, 0 to a couple thousand a month, and then sharing with them all that knowledge that we've learned with big brands over the years. Because there's little things like ship 2 of your product, not 1 of your product, only sell 2 of your product, not 1, because you hit different weight ranges. And it's kind of, we're having a really good time right now.
That's great. I think if you're with us now, I would pause and step back 5 minutes and just have a re-listen, because I think just some of the things you said there, I mean, just simple things like, I think quite often a lot of people, when they're negotiating, they don't pick up the bloody phone or they don't have a conversation with that individual, like just an old school building a relationship with the individual. I think when you're saying about that, painting the picture about, if you're in a subscription business, obviously the idea is that those people are buying off you every month. Obviously there's some, we'll come to that in a minute, but ultimately you can forecast, quite in the future with certain, with your order book and your order ramp up rate, your retention rate. So based on X, Y, Z, we can see in 12 months, we're going to be doing 4 times the amount. And that's 4 more trucks a week or day or whatever it is. So if you do me this now, you look, I'll show you the facts, the hard figures of the scale that we've managed to achieve in 6 months or 2 years. What we're going to, our targets are actually tenfold. You're pitching, ultimately, like you would be pitching your business for investment. You're pitching, that growth of that ramp of opportunity to them. Obviously, as a eCom store, you've got options out there, different 3PLs, different, companies to work with, getting to know those people. Taking them for whether that's a pint or a proper business lunch, is as important as the as those suppliers of whatever it is you're selling.
We do these interviews in our warehouse intentionally because I say, look, there's that's Mr. Kanarski.
I wasn't sure whether that was a video running or it's the real.
No, man, that's the real deal. That is the real deal. And really, what is the goal is don't have Kanarski walking around the warehouse trying to find your stuff or whatever. Like, how can we simplify that process? And what we see is people just they think it's a software, they think it's something, they forget there's boots on the ground, right? And it's not easy or it's frustrating. Like it's just, it just costs more money. And simple things like food CPG, probably 15 to 20% ish of your MSRP should be going to like store pack ship. If your product doesn't expire, probably closer to like 10 to 18%, right? If it's really complicated, you might get around 20 to 25%. And just like little things like that, like, keep your facility honest. And I don't like this smoke and mirrors attitude of the logistics industry. And how do you smoke it out? Show up face to face. It's such a basic thing, but we all, would rather click a button and duck, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So we've got a subscription business. We are doing very well. We've got however many, depending on what your definition of well is and a successful business, but that old retention piece, trying to stop people cancelling at month 3 or month 7, whatever your sort of drop off may be. It's going to vary. Obviously, if you're a coffee addict like me, I'd never cancel them subscriptions. I'm like hardcore. 3 or 4 subscriptions are dropping to my house every week. But certain things and certain products, it's trying to get people to stick and stay. What are some of the things you can recommend to our listeners to get people to stick on their, to keep buying their subscriptions? I know it's going to vary and depend quite a lot, but
I have a very different
innovative things you've seen to get people to stick.
Yeah. Okay. So I get a lot of presentations about this topic, and I also get a lot of hate about this topic. So this is polarizing what I'm about to say. Maybe you don't want them to stick. Oh, right. like why do you want them to stick? So you can spend more money trying to get them to stick around, right? When we had our consumer, I'll give an example. When we had Bulu Box, and we started off with, 8 months retention, and it doing more subscription. We were number 6 by the time we kind of sunset that program. There was 14,000 plus subscription boxes on the market, right? And now you go from $1 for customer acquisition to, 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks, right? But what we figured out was, hey, maybe we stop fighting the churn and let's just look at it for what it is. After about 3 months, people are tired of getting vitamin and supplement samples. Okay. Yeah. We know those metrics are solid. Like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Maybe what we do is we launch our own brands and we sample it with the other brands. And then we coupon people to come back and use their rewards points to get a full-size vitamin on repeat delivery. Right. And maybe we push that model to other brands. Right. And the thing that people need to pay attention to is, what is your margin, right? And what is the customer acquisition cost to lifetime value? And what is the payback for when you make back that customer acquisition cost? In the software industry, they call it CAC to LTV payback ratio, right? Yeah. And so I would argue that, when you get your marketing down and based on how many months people are staying, you're actually trying to get the CAC to LTV payback ratio to work out. So you make about 3 times more than what you paid for somebody. But I would just say, like, man, if you're breaking even or profitable, just keep that subscription going, because you can start to look at it like a direct mail piece, right?
Yeah.
And now talk to your customers. What do they want, right? Do they want other products? Do they want different flavors? Whatever it is. So I think if you get anybody to subscribe for more than 2 or 3 months, that's incredible. And it's very rare that people, I know somebody with a 3-year lifetime value for a consumer packaged good, but they can never keep up because there's so much, it's like a design home type of thing. And there's just so much high touch with it. And that's what we see as the inverse relationship is the more time that's spent on the subscription, packing it, making it customizable, the longer the retention, but that can get out of hand. So I think it's more about, what's your CAC to LTV payback ratio? Do you have subscription? Do you have individual purchase? Do you have gifting, right? And I view it as one tool of many that you should be doing, right?
Yeah, that's exciting, isn't it? That's making my my brain go on overload there.
Yeah, I always feel like, if you have a subscription, you're essentially sending a monthly catalog, right? Now, what are you going to do with that, right? Well, talk to your customers, see what would get them to keep coming back to you. And it might be as simple as like, they really want to hear about the founders and their story. That might be what it is. Or it might be, ooh, this is just a pit stop for them before they get prescriptions, and you can't supply that. So maybe you talk to the prescription companies and do like a data exchange type of thing. So there's value. You just need to find it, right?
Yeah, I see not quite the same, but I see in a lot of the various subscriptions I've got, the complementing brands are putting their details in there. So I'll buy a coffee subscription, and the next thing I know, I've got a food hamper, or a food, like a meal plan company flyer, and then the next week I've got a wine company. So obviously they're doing like you say, a data exchange where you put our flyers in yours, I'll put half of your flyers in ours, and that type of thing. Doing an exchange, but probably not a month one, because you've got that two or three months. Obviously depends on the brand of the product or the industry more so. But they're doing that data exchange, and then you're picking up new customers from somebody else's database and vice versa.
Yeah. And what another big thing that we see people kind of make the mistake of is like, well, not a mistake, but they just don't think it through. Maybe, if it is a coffee subscription, like it's one thing to just send. We always say good, fast, or cheap. Pick one of them. People say pick two, but for subscription, pick one of them because you can't be all three of them, right?
Yeah.
So if you're cheap, maybe the packaging is low grade. You're just going for cost effectiveness, right? Fast might just literally be that. It's like same day delivery. Good might actually be your subscription isn't about your coffee. It's about the tools and how do you do a French press and how do you do, and I see we've worked with coffee brands where, their first kit is actually about roasting the beans, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just, you can think about it so many different ways. And the reality is you actually are fighting Netflix in subscription, right? You are fighting Disney, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta really.
Yeah. That's quite a tough gig, isn't it? Trying to, which subscription is going to get cancelled first, yours or Netflix? It's not going to be Netflix.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. Whoever has the better emotional benefit will win. You know what I mean?
Netflix is getting too good.
Yeah. I canceled Disney recently because we got Mark Rober, I think is his name. My kids started watching something on YouTube, and they have an incredible subscription box. I never buy, so I have access to as many as I want. But it was a really interesting science project box, and he's got the YouTube videos to back it. And my kid's guy he's 7, he's got a budget. I'm like, what do you want? With this, and he took the box.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think on the coffee example, one of the firms I deal with, each month, they're sending like 2 or 3 different roasts, but they're from different regions and different family, farms, I guess, farms. So, you get a little card saying, oh, this is from Paraguay, and this is the blah, blah, blah family. They've been here 40 years, and their family is this. There's a little picture of the family on the back of the card.
Yeah.
So you're like emotionally, into that background, the history, the family legacy of this farm in the middle of wherever it may be. And this, that's cool. And I find myself Googling have a little, it is, there it is, Google Maps, have a look at their farm, it's quite that story and buying it.
That. Yeah, I love that. That's exactly what we're talking about. And you can get into the soil, the beans. What's the one copy where it's like cat droppings? Have you ever read about that?
Yeah. That's I think it's Vietnamese, maybe. I think.
Yeah, I had one, but they didn't tell me until after I drank it.
Oh yeah, I was in Vietnam.
No, it's.
I was in Vietnam. I was in Vietnam about 10 months ago, and that is a real thing.
Yeah. Also, that Turkish coffee is so cool. We saw that. So many fun things you can do.
So we're sat here in February 2024. What advice would you give to business owners right now, e-com store owners? We've had, I would say, on the surface, fairly challenging 2023. What would you say to business owners now?
In the midst of chaos, there is big opportunity. And I think what we see is a lot of chaos right now. And whether it's manufacturing, lack of raw ingredients, whatever, like the pandemic, I call it the pandemic hangover, is still happening, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also what I see is really interesting things you can do with ChatGPT, really interesting things. So there's kind of like, there's these little nuggets that are out there. And I know a kid in Lincoln, Nebraska. I don't know him. I'm trying to find him. He sells $1 million on TikTok of t-shirts. And like, why aren't you on TikTok, right? Like that's like one of our focuses is like social media selling, right? And so I think that you need to tune out the noise and you need to focus in on who your customer is and what problem do you solve for them or what value do you bring for them. And then I love it because it's a lot of ground and pound right now. Like show up at your manufacturer, like tell, because it's kind of going up and down the supply chain right now. And so I think it's a super fun time. I would also say beware, and I love big brand box retailers, but I just don't think it's a good strategy anymore to go Shopify, Amazon, Target, okay, whatever. I think you need to start with eCommerce and build independent stores, right? Like create a demand for retail buyers to want you, but it's manufacturers are really starting to get a lockdown on big brand retailers, like going straight from the manufacturer to the retailer. And that's tough to compete with. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant advice. I think tough times are good personally as well. I think it's creates opportunity. I think it creates opportunity. There's quite a lot of change.
There's never been more, sorry, I'm doing it.
Sorry, you go.
There's never been more sales channels opportunities. That's the good news, right? Like TikTok, Etsy, like whatever it is. And nobody is saying you have to sell under the same brand everywhere, right? You can have multiple brands, multiple Shopify sites, and that's the opportunity that I see. So sorry.
Yeah, no, I was sort of a similar vein. I think when things can be a bit tricky, and maybe there's a element of panic in the streets almost maybe, and I think it creates opportunity, where there is maybe more challenges, whether that's on supply. So then building that if you're the kind of person that then spends time building those relationships like you talked about, whether that's with your logistics company, whether that's with your supplier, and you've got that personal touch, the personal skills, whereas maybe your competitors just start passing money back and forth and not building that relationship. You've got that edge potentially. Obviously, you've still got a bit. I know obviously money is a big part of this process, so we have to. We've got to keep things moving. But ultimately, I think when things get tough, there is a lot of opportunity out there, and certain industries come to mind at the moment where I know there's quite a few sites that we're aware of have sort of folded and closed. But that's created opportunity for people then to either mop up demand or buy their assets, and decide obviously they can do what they want with them, whether that's, if it's as simple as buying a domain name that's well ranked or buying a whole warehouse full of stock or, the opportunities, they seem to be very many at the moment, I would say, just with the potential shipping increases around the world at the moment with the various things that are going on. It's so for planning that stock, those relationships you've got with your manufacturers overseas, they could be the difference between having stock and not having stock right now for those that aren't building those relationships or aren't able to order and forecast. Yeah. So, okay. So back to subscriptions. Last couple of questions then, Paul. So crystal ball time, the future of subscriptions. Every man and his dog's going to have a subscription. And if you haven't, you should have one, I reckon.
Well, I think we can afford it in the United States.
So how are you going to get ahead? 12 months from now, what are maybe some of the things that the standout subscription firms are going to be doing, the standout sort of experiences on that delivery? What are they going to be doing?
Yeah, I think there's it's hard to gauge with technology and the curve, right? Because things are just magically happening overnight. You're like, whoa, like that. So I think the number one thing is like stay on top of the trends. Don't jump too early. Don't jump too late. And know that it's going to feel a little risky if you're trying something new, right? I also think that we will see fairly soon two pretty big, not even pretty big, it's just going to kind of we're going to wake up one day and go, oh, whoa, when did that happen? But I think what's going to happen is based on your data at checkout, people are going to kind of already know what you want, right? So I view kind of like the opportunity of having support from manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. So when somebody goes to purchase, it isn't buttons anymore that you select. It's saying like, based on your data, this is probably what you want, 3 months, this price, right? Or you're just going to be able to say like, I want it delivered this time. I want it this big. I want it this many repeat deliveries. Like I just see that opening up more. And I think the next thing is payment systems are just going to be like 100%. It's like you got your Google Pay and your Apple Pay and like that's that, right? And so when you think about what that looks like, then you can start to kind of back into like, what should you be thinking about and doing now, right? So I don't think it's like necessarily the death of subscriptions. What I would say is the evolution is the checkout button and the pay button are going to kind of think for you, and you can tweak it, and you better make damn sure that you have the ability to support that, or else, you're going to get kind of left in the dust pretty quick. And that's tough physically to be able to deliver for those opportunities. And the people that hit it are going to win,
Mm-hmm. So I'm just thinking the best way to summarize that would be, so just super deep personalization, that's sort of layering in AI. Yeah, it's quite a scary tool, really.
That's what everybody thinks, right? And what I would say is, the internet was probably scary for people with catalogs, right? It depends how you look at it, because we're using AI right now, and we did a ChatGPT plug into our CRM, and it's the smallest thing, and it is mind bending.
Yeah,
how you could just ask questions, right? And that's not a big deal, and that's $20 a month and a couple of YouTube videos, and it changed the game for our sales team.
Yeah.
So like maybe it's just like, do you look at it as a threat or opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And zig when everybody else is zagging.
Yeah, a bit like the previous question, really. Yeah, opportunity everywhere. So thank you for coming on the show, Paul. Absolute pleasure. I like to finish every episode with a book recommendation. Do you have a book to recommend to our listeners?
Oh man, I've been reading weird UFO books, so I can't recommend any of those, right? I would probably say Disciplined Entrepreneur by Bill Otlet. That's probably the one, and honestly, the workbook's great. But it's always a good gut check. There's about 22 steps of things that you need to be aware of as you're running a business and launching a business. And I think Bill Otlet, Disciplined Entrepreneur, is just always a good gut check to make sure you don't have any potholes coming up.
That sounds great. That's not one we've had before. That's really good. Yeah, no, we'll get that linked up and ordered.
Yeah, head of the entrepreneurial department at MIT. I got to spend a week with him and Brian from HubSpot, and it was just phenomenal. It was so, It was wild. So.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, Paul. For those that want to find out more about you, more about Bulu, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, we got bulugroup.com. We have pauljarrett.com. But, if you made it this far, first, thank you. Thank you, Richard. And I'd say just drop me an email. It's just paul@bulugroup.com.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And I'll see you again soon. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are listening to this podcast. You're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next one.